I'm Dr. Beverly Yuen Thompson, and I am your professor here for Sociology of the Family. So in this short video, I just wanted to talk about Chapter 1 of our textbook. We're reading the family textbook, and so for each module, we'll cover basically one chapter. And so in this short video, I just wanted to overview some of the main points of Chapter 1, a sociology of the family. So in sociology, I really always start my class by pointing out the distinction between sociology and psychology. And so in sociology, we really focus on social institutions. We're looking at society on a macro scale. So throughout this course, we should really focus on the concepts of institutions, demographics, and social power. And power is just how power is exercised through people, through institutions, and impacts us. In the first chapter, the authors start by talking just about our own Americans' interest in the concepts of genealogy. So where does your family come from? And so this is why in the sociological autobiography project, I had you guys really talk about, where your family comes from, where your grandparents might have migrated to, where you grew up, if your family has been in that town for many generations, and so on. So in the next section, we really want to understand the different definitions of the family. And so they go through the personal family, the legal definition of the family. How does the government, the church, the law really regulate who is in your family and who is not? And then they talk about, for example, in 2015 when same-sex marriages were finally recognized through the Supreme Court decision for the entire country, and how that alters just the data we collect on families and so on, which leads into the section on the census of how such data is collected. And as sociologists, we're really looking at this macro picture of society as a whole. And so I really want you guys to understand, the census data and just our position within the American culture. In the next section on page 11, they talk about the family as an institutional arena. And so just really consider what that means. What does it mean that the family is an institution? And then how does the family interact with other social institutions? How does the state and the family interact? How does the market and the family interact? And so the textbook goes into that, and it has this kind of graph about just the interactions between the market, the state, and the family, and how these institutions really reinforce each other. So the next section on page 18 talks about contemporary sociological theories. And so it's important as a sociology student that you do understand the very basic sociological theories and concepts within our field. The consensus theory, there's the conflict theory, which has historic kind of foundation in Karl Marx theory of just looking at those social classes, working class, the owner class, and the conflicts within these groups. The chapter talks about feminist theory, so how has feminist theory really influenced our perspective on the family and the roles within our families. The book talks about exchange theories, so defining that as seeing the individual or groups with different resources, strengths and weaknesses, entering into mutual relationships to maximize their own gains. The theory that I use most in my research, the symbolic interaction, which really looks at the micro human interactions on a daily basis and how that contributes to upholding these larger institutions and social structures in our society. The next part of this chapter on page 24 talks about studying the family, and it goes over the different sociological methodologies that researchers use in order to study the family. And I really want you to understand these different kinds of tools that are used to study the family so that you understand the strengths and the weaknesses of each of these methods, and what we can learn from this kind of data, but also what might be lacking. And so, for example, there might be a discussion question that asks you to really apply these different kinds of methodologies to what kind of data you would gain from using them. And so the types of methods include sample survey, a longitudinal survey, in-depth interviews and observations, time use studies, and so on. And then the chapter concludes by talking about how big data might really change our understanding of the sociology of the family. And so big data would be, for example, just all this internet data that's being gathered upon each person. And so, all of the things that you've looked up on Google, all the things that you've posted on social media, all the ads that you've looked at, all the things that you've purchased. What does this tell us about family life, how families communicate, how families behave, and so on? So the end of the chapter has these, key terms, questions for review, and so this is a really good study guide. If you could go through and be able to define these kinds of key terms that were covered within the chapter, and also be able to understand and answer these questions for review at the end of the chapter, then you'd be really in a good situation for the assignments that will be covered on that chapter. The assignments include discussion boards, quizzes, and so on. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to reading your work. Take care.